Why don't you stand by the kitchen doors? It'll keep the family photos clean. The bride sneered at me like I was a stain on her white dress.
Subscribe.
My seat, the one I'd paid for, had been taken by a stranger. I calmly walked to the gift table, retrieved my $50,000, and
Subscribe.
said, "Don't worry. I'll stay out of the frame forever." 3 days into their honeymoon, I clicked one button, 158 missed calls. My name is Maya. And at 32 years old, I'm a senior portfolio manager on Wall Street. But to my family, I'm just the single, unsuccessful sister who should be grateful for a seat near the trash. Before I tell you how I turned their dream wedding into a financial nightmare, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to remind people who actually signs the checks. The grand ballroom at the Pierre Hotel smelled of expensive lilies and old money. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over 200 guests. This was the wedding of the century, or at least that's what my brother Marcus and his bride Chelsea wanted everyone to believe. I smoothed the fabric of my navy silk dress, preparing to take my seat at the family table. I'd written the check for the deposit on this venue 6 months ago. I'd secured the florist when they overbooked. I assumed my place was up front with my parents. I was wrong. The wedding planner, a woman named Sarah, looked at her clipboard, then at me, with pity in her eyes. "Miss Washington," she whispered, "I'm so sorry, but there's been a last-minute change. Your seat isn't at table 1. She led me away from the days, away from the centerpieces, and toward the back of the room. We kept walking past the cousins, past the co-workers, until we reached the swinging double doors of the kitchen. The smell of searing steak and dish soap wafted out every time a waiter kicked the door open. There sat a small round table, with no tablecloth and no flowers, just a plastic sign that read, "Reserved." Chelsea floated over in her $20,000 Vera Wang gown. She smiled, that tight, practiced smile she used for Instagram photos. "Oh, good, you found your spot," she chirped. "Marcus and I thought this would be better. You know how the lighting is up front, it's very harsh. We want the family photos to look bright and clean." She waved a hand vaguely near her face, then mine. Her meaning was clear. My dark skin would ruin her aesthetic. My presence would clutter her perfect white fantasy. "You understand, right, Maya?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "It's just for the aesthetic. Plus, it's closer to the exit if you need to leave early." She looked at the waiters bustling past with trays of dirty dishes, then back at me, waiting for me to be grateful, waiting for me to shrink like I always did. I looked across the room at my brother. Marcus was standing by the cake, laughing with his groomsmen. He saw me standing by the kitchen doors. He saw Chelsea speaking to me. He adjusted his silk tie and looked away. That was the moment the last thread of loyalty snapped. I'd paid off his student loans. I'd bought him his first car. I'd engaged the best real estate lawyer to secure their apartment lease. And he couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt a cold calm wash over me, the same ice-cold focus I used when closing multi-million-dollar deals. "You're absolutely right, Chelsea," I said, my voice steady. "You should have the perfect photos." I walked past her toward the gift table near the entrance. It was piled high with silver toasters and crystal vases. Right in the center sat a thick cream envelope with my name on it. I picked it up. Chelsea followed me, her veil trailing on the carpet. "What are you doing?" she hissed. I opened the flap of the envelope just enough for her to see the stacks of crisp $100 bills inside. $50,000. The money they needed to pay the caterer tonight. The money they needed for the down payment on their dream apartment. I slid the envelope into my Hermes clutch. "You said you wanted the photos to be clean," I told her. "You said I should stay out of the way. So I'm removing myself and my contribution from the frame. Consider this my wedding gift to myself." I turned my back on her shocked face and walked out the double doors into the cool New York night. I marched across the marble floor of the lobby, the sound of my heels echoing against the high ceilings. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see the confusion or the murmurs spreading through the ballroom. I just wanted fresh air. I wanted away from the scent of lilies and hypocrisy. But I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Not with my mother. Teresa caught up to me just before I reached the revolving doors. She didn't call my name. She simply grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, painful. Her fingernails dug into my skin through the silk of my dress. "Where do you think you're going?" she hissed. Her face was flushed not with embarrassment, but with rage. She looked like a woman whose carefully constructed reality was being threatened. I pulled my arm away. I'm leaving, mother. I'm going home. Oh no, you're not, she snapped, stepping in front of me to block my path. You're going to turn right around and go back in there. You're going to apologize to Chelsea, and you're going to sit where you were told. Do you have any idea how bad this looks? Walking out in the middle of the reception? It looks like I have self-respect, I said, my voice calm. Something you never taught me, but I learned anyway. Self-respect? She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Is that what you call it? I call it jealousy, Maya. Pure, ugly jealousy. You can't stand that it's Marcus's day. You can't stand that he found someone like Chelsea. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Look at this place. Look at these people. Chelsea comes from a good family, a prominent family. Her father is a judge. Her mother is on the board of the museum. And you're trying to ruin this connection for us because you're bitter and alone. I stared at the woman who gave birth to me. She was wearing a dress I'd paid for, shoes I'd bought her for Mother's Day, and she looked at me with nothing but contempt. I'm not jealous, Mom, I said. I'm tired. I'm tired of being treated like an ATM and a prop. Chelsea insulted me. She put me by the kitchen, and that's where you belong. She spat the words out. Lower your voice, Maya. You're embarrassing me. You think because you got that little job in the city filing papers for rich men that you're better than us? You're a secretary, Maya. You answer phones. You fetch coffee. Marcus is marrying into status. He's elevating this family. He's the future. You should be down on your knees thanking Chelsea for letting you be part of this, for letting you be in the same room as her family. The words washed over me, familiar and toxic. A secretary. That was the lie I'd let them believe for 10 years. It was easier than explaining what a portfolio manager did. Easier than explaining that I managed assets worth more than the entire net worth of everyone in that ballroom combined. But to Teresa, I would always be the help, the scapegoat, the one who existed to serve the golden child. You need to learn your place, she continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Your brother is building a dynasty. He needs this. We need this. So you're going to go back inside. You're going to give Chelsea that envelope. And you're going to smile for the photos, even if they put you in the basement. Do you understand me? You're going to serve this family because that's the only value you have. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the desperation in her eyes, the hunger for validation from people who would never truly accept her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing. I'm not going back inside, Teresa, I said, using her first name. And I'm not giving anyone that envelope, she gasped, her hand raising as if to strike me. But she stopped when she saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a frightened daughter anymore. It was the look of a stranger. You're making a mistake, she warned, her voice shaking. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. Don't bother calling us when you're lonely and old and realized you threw away the only people who tolerated you. I adjusted my clutch, feeling the weight of the cash inside the $50,000 she thought was just a few hundred to pay the band. She had no idea. I think I can live with that, I said. I pushed past her and walked through the revolving doors. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, but I didn't get far because just as I reached the curb, my brother Marcus came running out of the hotel entrance, his face red and frantic. Maya, stop. Wait. Marcus's voice cracked as he sprinted across the sidewalk. He looked frantic, his bow tie askew and a sheen of sweat already breaking out on his forehead, despite the cool evening air. He skidded to a halt in front of me, blocking my path to the curb where I was tracking my car on the app. I stopped and looked at him, for a split second. A tiny, foolish part of me hoped he'd run after me to apologize. I hoped he'd say he was sorry for letting his wife humiliate me. I hoped he'd say I was his big sister and that he loved me more than a photo opportunity. But then he opened his mouth. You can't just leave with the envelope. Maya, he panted, reaching out as if to grab my purse. Chelsea's freaking out. The catering manager is demanding the second half of the payment right now. He says if we don't pay in full before the main course is served, they're going to stop service. You have to go back in there and pay him. I stared at him. The betrayal was so absolute, it was almost funny. You don't care that your wife sat me next to the trash cans? I asked, my voice quiet. You don't care that she insulted me to my face? Marcus rolled his eyes, throwing his hands up in an exasperated gesture. Oh, my God, Maya, get over yourself. It's just a table. Why do you always have to be so sensitive? This is her day. It's my day. Why do you have to make everything about you? I make it about me? I repeated. I paid for your tuition, Marcus. I paid for your car insurance for 3 years because you claimed you were too stressed to work while studying. I paid for this venue deposit and you should pay, he interrupted, his voice taking on a whiny, entitled edge that I remembered all too well from our childhood. You're the big sister. That's what you're supposed to do. You help. Remember 5 years ago? Remember Atlantic City? I froze. The memory washed over me, cold and sharp. Yeah, I remember, I said. I was in deep, Maya, he pressed, stepping closer, lowering his voice, even though we were on a busy street. Those guys were going to break my legs. I owed them $20,000, and I had nothing. Mom and Dad didn't have it. But you found it. You scraped it together. You acted like you were broke, eating ramen for months. But you found the money because you knew it was your duty to protect me. You always find the money. He was right. I'd paid his gambling debt. I'd told him I took out a high-interest personal loan to do it just to scare him straight. In reality, I'd simply written a check from my bonus account, but he didn't know that. To him, I was just the struggling secretary who miraculously saved him because I was obligated to serve him. That was a mistake, I said. I should have let you figure it out yourself. But you didn't, he said smugly, because we're family, and family pays up. So stop being dramatic. Give me the envelope and come back inside. Chelsea said if you apologize, she'll let you sit at the cousin table in the back corner. It's better than the kitchen, right? He held out his hand, palm up, expecting the cash. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He truly believed my purpose on this earth was to be his ATM and his doormat. He thought my silence was weakness. He thought my generosity was a mandate. I looked at his soft, uncalloused hands that had never worked a hard day in their life because I'd smoothed every path for him. You're right, Marcus, I said, opening my clutch. He let out a sigh of relief, his eyes greedily tracking the movement of my hands. Thank God. You had me worried for a second. Just give it here, and I'll fix everything with the caterer. I reached into the bag. My fingers brushed against the thick envelope containing the $50,000, the down payment for the life he thought he was going to live. I bypassed it, instead. I reached into the small side pocket of my wallet and pulled out a single crisp $100 bill. Marcus frowned, confusion clouding his face. What is that? Where's the rest? This is all you're getting, I said. I crumpled the bill in my fist and then shoved it roughly into the breast pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He stumbled back, surprised by the physical force of the action. What are you doing? He stammered. Consider that a tip, I said, my voice ice cold. A tip for your audacity, a tip for your stupidity, and a severance package for your role as my brother. Maya, wait, you can't. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb beside us, my ride. The driver stepped out and opened the door for me, bowing his head respectfully. It was a level of service Marcus had never seen, but one I was very accustomed to. I slid into the leather back seat. Marcus lunged for the door, but the driver stepped in front of him, blocking his path with a broad chest and a stony glare. I rolled down the window just an inch as the car began to move. Marcus was running alongside, banging on the glass. Maya, you can't leave us with the bill, he screamed, his face contorted in panic. We can't afford it. We'll be ruined. I looked him dead in the eye through the tinted glass. Then I guess you better start washing dishes, I said. I rolled the window up, shutting out his screams. As the car merged into the New York traffic, I watched him in the side mirror, shrinking into the distance, standing alone on the sidewalk, a small man in a cheap suit. Realizing for the first time that his safety net was gone, the elevator doors slid open directly into the penthouse, revealing an expanse of floor-to-ceiling glass that framed the entire Manhattan skyline. The city lights twinkled below like a carpet of diamonds. This was my reality, not the cramped basement apartment in Queens my family thought I rented. Not the struggling life of a secretary they imagined I lived. I kicked off my heels, letting them sink into the plush Moroccan wool rug. The silence here was expensive, the kind of quiet you could only buy with 7 figures. I walked past the original Basquiat hanging in the hallway. I walked past the custom Italian marble kitchen island where I drank my morning coffee while managing portfolios worth billions. My parents thought I took the subway because I couldn't afford a car. They didn't know I had a driver. They thought I wore outlet store clothes. They didn't know my blazers were bespoke. I'd built a fortress of wealth and power right under their noses. And I'd never let them in, not once, because I knew that the moment they saw this, they wouldn't see my hard work. They would only see a gold mine to be excavated until it was empty. Naomi was waiting for me in the living room. She was perched on the white velvet sofa, a glass of Pinot Noir in one hand and my iPad in the other. She looked up as I entered, her sharp eyes scanning my face. She didn't look surprised to see me back so early. She was my lawyer, my best friend, and the only person in the world who knew exactly how much I was worth. "You're home before the cake," she said, her voice calm but dangerous. "That means they did something stupid. They sat me by the kitchen doors," I said, walking to the bar cart. I poured myself a drink, my hand finally trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Chelsea said I would ruin the aesthetic of the family photos. She put me next to the service entrance. "Naomi." I could smell the shrimp cocktail from the trash. Naomi set her glass down on the coffee table with a sharp click. Her eyes flashed with the kind of fury that usually cost her clients $1,000 an hour. "I told you," she said, standing up and crossing the room to me. "I told you 10 years ago when you paid off Marcus's student loans, and he didn't even say thank you. I told you when you bought your father that truck and he complained about the color. They don't love you, Maya. They consume you." I took a long sip of the wine, letting the burn settle my stomach. "I took the money back, Naomi. I took the $50,000. Naomi froze. Then a slow, shark-like smile spread across her face. She picked up the wine bottle and refilled my glass to the brim. "Good," she said. "It's about time you stopped being their retirement plan and started being their reckoning. You've spent a decade playing the role of the dutiful poor relation while running half of Wall Street. You let them treat you like a servant because you thought if you were humble enough, they might eventually love you. But tonight proved it. You could give them the world, and they'd still complain about the wrapping paper." She walked over to the safe, hidden behind a panel in the wall. She tapped in the code, and the heavy steel door swung open. "Put the money away, Maya," she said. "And then come here. We have work to do because if I know you, and I do, you didn't just take the cash. You're ready to take everything." I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The skyline reflected back at me. I didn't look like a secretary. I looked like a shark who'd just smelled blood in the water. "You're right," I said, walking toward the safe. "I'm done playing nice. Let's look at the real estate files." Naomi laughed, a low sound of pure anticipation. She pulled a thick file folder from her briefcase. The label read, Phoenix Ventures LLC. Inside were the deeds, the leases, and the leverage I held over every single aspect of my brother's life. "Pour another glass, Naomi," I said. "It's going to be a long night." I placed the thick cream envelope onto the cold metal shelf of the safe. It sat there next to my passport and a stack of municipal bonds. $50,000. To me, it was a rounding error, a good week in the market. But to Marcus and Chelsea, it was their entire future. It was the difference between the life they pretended to have and the reality they were about to face. I reached past the cash and pulled out a navy blue legal folder. The label on the front was crisp and white, Phoenix Ventures LLC. I handed it to Naomi, who accepted it with reverence usually reserved for religious texts. She ran her hand over the cover, knowing exactly what was inside. "You know, they've been bragging about that apartment for months," I said, leaning against the wall, my arms crossed. A 3-bedroom loft in Tribeca, with a private terrace and floor-to-ceiling windows. They told everyone they found a unicorn, a landlord who lived overseas and didn't know the current market value. They think they negotiated a steal. $2,000 a month for a place that lists for 10. They think they're geniuses. Naomi opened the folder and ran her manicured finger down the deed. Her eyes danced with amusement. "They don't know that Phoenix Ventures is a shell company," I continued. "They don't know that I bought that unit with cash 6 months ago, specifically because I heard Chelsea telling her mother it was her dream home. I let them believe they were lucky. I let them sign a lease that looked too good to be true because I wanted them to feel secure. I wanted them to move their furniture in. I wanted them to visualize their children playing in that living room. But luck runs out," Naomi said, tapping a specific clause on the 3rd page of the lease. "Especially when that luck is actually a trap set by the sister you betrayed." She began to read aloud. "Clause for B, the security deposit and first month's rent, totaling $50,000 due to the high value of furnishings and insurance requirements, must be received via certified check within 24 hours of the lease start date. Failure to provide funds results in immediate termination of the lease and forfeiture of all access. The lease starts tomorrow," I said. "Sunday, the day they leave for their honeymoon." Marcus was counting on that envelope to write the check. He thought he was just going to hand the cash over to the management company I hired and walk into his new life. He has no savings, Naomi. He spent it all on the ring and the deposit for the wedding planner. He banked everything on me being the obedient sister one last time. Naomi closed the folder with a satisfying snap. So he's homeless, she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. He just doesn't know it yet. I walked back to the window, looking down at the city. Somewhere in that mess of lights, my brother was probably frantically calling his friends, trying to borrow money to pay for a wedding reception that was already falling apart. He had no idea that the roof over his head was about to disappear too. I pulled my phone out of my clutch. I opened the app that controlled the smart home systems for my properties. I scrolled down past my own penthouse, past my vacation home in the Hamptons, to the unit labeled Tribeca Loft. The status read, Unlocked Residence Pending. I hovered my thumb over the lock icon. The power to change the codes, to disable the key fobs, to lock them out of their dream life, was right there at my fingertips. Not yet, I whispered. Let them sweat a little longer. Let them get to the airport. Let them think they've escaped. And then, when they're halfway across the Pacific Ocean, thinking they've gotten away with treating me like garbage, I'll pull the rug out from under them. Naomi raised her glass. To Phoenix Ventures, she said. May it rise from the ashes of their audacity. To family, I replied, taking a sip. And the high cost of rent. The DJ dropped a heavy bass beat that shook the crystal glasses on the tables, but Marcus couldn't hear the music. All he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears. He stood near the head table, clutching a glass of champagne that had gone warm in his sweating hand. His eyes darted around the room, scanning the crowd for a navy blue dress that was no longer there. He patted his chest pocket again, praying that by some miracle the thick envelope had reappeared. But all he felt was the single crumpled $100 bill Maya had shoved at him. Mr. Washington. The voice was low and discreet, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Marcus turned to find the catering manager standing right behind him. The man was holding a leather bill folder, and he wasn't smiling. We need to settle the second half of the invoice, sir. Per the contract, payment is due before the main course is served. Marcus forced a laugh. It came out as a high-pitched squeak. Of course, right. Can we just do this tomorrow? I'm in the middle of my wedding. The manager didn't blink. I'm afraid not, sir. The contract states immediate payment. We have $20,450 outstanding. If we don't receive payment in the next 10 minutes, we'll be forced to halt the service. The kitchen staff has already paused the plating of the filet mignon. 10 minutes. The room seemed to spin. Chelsea was on the dance floor, waving at him, her smile bright and demanding. She had no idea. She thought the bill was paid. She thought they were rich. She thought Maya had taken care of it like she always did. Marcus wiped his forehead with a cocktail napkin. Look, my sister has the cash. She just stepped out for a moment. She'll be back any second. The manager looked unimpressed. He'd seen this before. The sister who left 20 minutes ago in a private car? I saw Miss Washington leave, sir. She didn't look like she was returning. We take all major credit cards. Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. Credit cards. His cards were maxed out. He'd spent his entire credit limit on the deposits, the tuxedo rental, and the bachelor party in Miami. He had 5 cards in his wallet, and every single one of them would decline faster than he could swipe them. He looked at the card machine in the manager's hand as if it were a loaded gun. There must be some flexibility here, Marcus pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. This is the Pierre. You can't just stop a wedding. Think of the embarrassment. We're a business, Mr. Washington. We don't work for free. You have 8 minutes. The manager took a step back, crossing his arms and waiting. He looked like an executioner in a tuxedo. Marcus looked around the room wildly. He saw his father, Robert, laughing with his new father-in-law near the bar. Robert didn't have $20,000. He barely had 20 until his next pension check came in. He saw his mother, Teresa, gossiping with her friends, showing off her ring. She was broke too. They were all broke.
Subscribe.
They were all playing dress up in a castle they couldn't afford, banking on a woman they treated like a servant to foot the bill. And now the servant was gone, and the bill was due. Marcus's hands shook as he reached for his wallet. He had to try something, anything. He pulled out his shiny platinum card, the one he got just to impress Chelsea, even though the interest rate was predatory. Try this one, he said, his voice trembling. And pray. He didn't pray to God. He prayed to the memory of Maya's generosity. He prayed that maybe, just maybe, she'd paid off his balance one last time before she left. But as the manager inserted the chip and the machine began to process, Marcus knew deep down that his luck had finally run out. The screen flashed. Processing, processing, and then the red light blinked, declined. The word flashed on the small screen in bright red letters. It was aggressive. It was final. And it was loud enough that even the waiter flinched. Marcus stared at the device in horror. But before he could stammer out an excuse, a heavy hand clapped him on the shoulder. It was Robert, my father. He strode into the circle of panic with the confidence of a man who believed his own hype. He adjusted his tuxedo jacket and cast a dismissive look at his sweating son. Step aside, Marcus, he boomed, his voice projecting so the nearby tables could hear. Let the adults handle this. Robert turned to the catering manager with a smile that was all teeth and arrogance. He reached into his inner pocket and produced a heavy black metal credit card. It was the kind of card that made a satisfying clatter when dropped on a table. It was the kind of card that screamed status. What Robert conveniently forgot was that it was a supplementary card attached to my primary account. I'd paid off the $15,000 balance on it last month because he claimed he needed it for medical expenses. In reality, he'd used it to buy a new set of golf clubs and a suit for this wedding. Run it for the full amount, Robert commanded, holding the card out between the fingers. And add a 20% tip for your trouble. We don't want to keep the guests waiting. He looked over at Chelsea's parents, the Worthingtons. They were sitting at the table of honor, looking like they smelled something rotting. Judge Worthington checked his vintage Rolex while his wife tightened her grip on her champagne flute. Robert gave them a reassuring nod, a gesture that said, "Don't worry about the help. We have it under control." The manager took the black card. He inserted it into the machine. Uptown in my penthouse, I sat on my white velvet sofa and unlocked my phone. I opened my banking app. I saw the pending authorization request for $24,000. It hovered on my screen, a digital question asking for my permission to save their reputation. I took a sip of wine, and then, with a single tap of my thumb, I pressed decline and lock card. Back in the ballroom, the machine beeped along, harsh tone that cut through the murmur of the crowd. Declined, the manager said, his voice flat. Robert laughed, a nervous, booming sound that fooled no one. That's impossible, he said. That card has a $50,000 limit. Run it again. It must be your machine. The chip is sensitive. The manager sighed, but he complied. He swiped it. He inserted it. He tapped it. Beep, beep, beep. Declined. Card reported lost or stolen. Please retain card. The manager looked at Robert, and then he slipped the metal card into his own pocket. I'm sorry, sir, but the bank has flagged this. I can't return the card, and we still need payment now. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert's face went from a confident bronze to a sickly shade of gray. He patted his pockets as if looking for another wallet, but we all knew there was nothing there. He was empty. At the head table, Chelsea's mother leaned in to whisper to her husband. But in the sudden quiet, her voice carried perfectly. I told you they weren't liquid, she hissed, her eyes narrowing as she looked at my father. All flash and no foundation. This is humiliating. Robert wilted. The patriarch, the big man on campus, the father who'd criticized my career choices for a decade, stood there powerless. He looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at him. And for the first time, they both realized that the Bank of Maya was permanently closed. The silence at table 1 was heavier than the crystal centerpieces. The catering manager stood like a statue, holding the dead credit card that my father had so arrogantly presented just moments before. All eyes were on Marcus, on the golden child, the man who'd bragged about his crypto investments and his non-existent real estate portfolio. He looked at his new bride. Chelsea's face was a mask of horrifying realization. Her lips were pressed so thin they'd turned white. Next to her, Judge Worthington was tapping his fork against the table, a rhythmic sound of judgment. Marcus cleared his throat. It sounded like dry leaves crunching. He adjusted his jacket, trying to summon the charisma that had allowed him to coast through life on my dime for 3 decades. He laughed, a short, breathless sound that bounced awkwardly off the high ceilings. Wow, he said, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. Can you believe the timing? I just got a notification on my phone. It's the bank. They're doing scheduled system maintenance tonight. The entire network is down for upgrades. That explains why Dad's card didn't go through. It's a security lockout protocol. It was a lie so thin you could read a newspaper through it. Banks don't shut down credit card networks for maintenance on Saturday nights during prime spending hours. But Marcus delivered it with the desperate conviction of a man watching his life crumble. He turned to the catering manager, his smile trembling at the edges. Look, obviously we can't process the transaction right this second because of the glitch. But I'll have the funds wired directly to your corporate account first thing tomorrow morning, as soon as the servers are back up. You have my word and my father's word. The manager looked at Marcus, then at the expensive tuxedo, then at the nervous sweat beading on Marcus's upper lip. He'd been in this business for 20 years. He knew exactly what a bounce check looked like before it was even written, but he also knew he was in the middle of the Pierre Hotel with 200 guests watching. Making a scene now would be bad for business. Very well, Mr. Washington, the manager said, his voice cool and professional. We'll allow the service to continue. However, if the wire transfer is not received by 9 a.m. tomorrow, we'll be forced to involve legal counsel and the police for theft of services. Marcus nodded vigorously. Absolutely. 9 a.m. Consider it done. As the manager walked away, Marcus collapsed into his chair. He reached for Chelsea's hand, but she pulled it away, pretending to adjust her veil. Her father leaned across the table. System maintenance, Judge Worthington repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. That's very convenient, Marcus. I hope for your sake that the system reboots quickly. I'd hate to think my daughter married a man who can't pay for his own dinner. Marcus swallowed hard. Don't worry, sir, he said, his voice shaking. It's handled.
Subscribe.
But inside his head, I knew exactly what was happening. He was doing the math. He needed $20,000 by sunrise. He had no assets, no credit, and no sister to save him. He was already mentally scrolling through his contact list, wondering which loan shark or predatory lender would take a call at midnight on a Saturday. He was planning to dig a hole so deep, he'd never climb out of it, just to survive the next 12 hours. The notification on my phone screen was polite, but lethal. Transaction declined. Authorization failed. Merchant, the Pierre Hotel. Amount, 24,500. I stared at the glowing text and felt a cold satisfaction settle deep in my chest. It was the digital confirmation of my father's public humiliation. I could almost see it happening in my mind. Robert standing there, chest puffed out, expecting the magic card to solve his problems just like I always did. And then the beep, the error message, the realization that the infinite well of resources he felt entitled to had finally run dry. Naomi leaned over from the sofa, swirling her wine glass. Did he try it? He tried it, I said, setting the phone down on the marble coffee table. And he failed. They're scrambling right now. Marcus is probably lying through his teeth, promising money he doesn't have. They're going to spend the rest of the night sweating through their tuxedos while I sleep on Egyptian cotton. But the night wasn't over yet. Not for me. Because the wedding reception was just the opening act. The real tragedy was scheduled for tomorrow. I picked up my phone again and navigated to the property management portal. I scrolled to the file for the Tribeca loft, the apartment Marcus and Chelsea had been bragging about for months. The one they called their starter castle. They'd posted photos of the floor plans on Facebook. They'd registered for furniture based on the dimensions of the living room. They'd built an entire future inside those walls, a future that relied on a $50,000 deposit that they no longer had. I opened the lease agreement on my screen. I highlighted clause for B, the clause that stated in no uncertain terms that possession of the property was contingent upon receipt of the full security deposit and first month's rent 24 hours prior to the lease start date. That deadline had passed 10 minutes ago. I pulled up the contact for Mr. Henderson, the building manager I employed to handle the day-to-day operations of my real estate portfolio. He was a man of rules. He didn't care about weddings. He didn't care about sob stories. He cared about contracts. I typed the message slowly, savoring every letter. Regarding unit for B, the tenants have defaulted on the mandatory deposit deadline. Please activate the immediate lockout protocol effective at midnight. Cancel all key fob access. Reset the smart locks. Do not accept partial payment. If they attempt to access the building, treat it as trespassing. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. I thought about Marcus. I thought about the little boy I used to walk to school. I thought about the brother I'd protected from bullies and bad grades and his own incompetence for 30 years, and then I thought about the table by the kitchen door. I thought about the smell of garbage. I thought about my mother gripping my arm and calling me a secretary. I thought about Chelsea sneering at my skin tone, implying I was too dark to be in her precious photos. They wanted a clean picture. I was going to give them a blank canvas. I pressed send. The message bubbled blue and then almost immediately changed to delivered. A moment later, 3 dots appeared. Understood, Miss Washington. Locks are being reset now. Access denied. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the cushion beside me. It was done. While they were down there dancing to the cha-cha slide and pretending everything was fine, they were simultaneously becoming homeless. They'd leave that hotel tomorrow, exhausted and hungover, expecting to walk into their new life. Instead, they were going to walk into a locked door and a reality check that no amount of charm could fix. Naomi raised an eyebrow, her smile sharp as a razor. You just evicted your brother on his wedding night. No, I said, picking up my wine glass. I just enforced the contract. Welcome to the real world, Marcus. Rent is due. The air in Bora Bora was thick with the scent of tropical flowers and the heavy perfume of unearned wealth. Marcus and Chelsea stepped off the private boat shuttle, looking every inch the power couple they pretended to be. Marcus wore white linen pants that he'd likely charged to a credit card he planned to ignore. Chelsea wore a sun hat wide enough to block out not just the UV rays, but reality itself. They walked into the open-air lobby of the resort like they owned the island. The concierge greeted them with a bow and a tray of chilled towels. Welcome to paradise, Mr. and Mrs. Washington. We have you confirmed in the overwater bungalow suite with the private plunge pool. It's our most exclusive accommodation, reserved for our Diamond Elite members. Marcus nodded smugly, adjusting his sunglasses. He didn't correct the man. He didn't mention that the Diamond Elite status belonged to his sister, Maya. He didn't mention that the first class tickets that brought them across the Pacific were purchased with 300,000 of my airline miles. He just took the towel, wiped the sweat from his neck, and acted like he belonged there. He was playing the part of the wealthy provider perfectly, ignoring the fact that 24 hours ago he was begging a catering manager for 5 more minutes. They were escorted to the bungalow on a golf cart, winding through the wooden walkways above the turquoise lagoon. When the door opened, revealing the glass floor panels and the view of the mountain, Chelsea actually shrieked, but she didn't run to the balcony to take it in. She ran to her bag to grab her ring light and tripod. Within minutes, she was live. I watched the stream from my office in Manhattan, a cold cup of coffee in my hand. Hey guys, she chirped into the camera, waving her hand to show off the ring that Marcus had bought with embezzled funds. We just landed in Bora Bora and I'm literally crying. Look at this view. Look at this water. She panned the camera around the suite, showing off the bottle of champagne sitting in the ice bucket. That champagne was a complimentary amenity for my loyalty tier. She pulled Marcus into the frame. He flashed a smile that didn't quite reach his terrified eyes. He wrapped his arms around her waist, posing like they were on the cover of a magazine. I just want to say a huge thank you to my amazing husband, Chelsea cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Thank you for making my dreams come true, baby. Thank you for this high-class lifestyle. You promised me the world, and you delivered. No budgets, just luxury. Marcus kissed her cheek for the audience. Anything for you, baby. He lied. You deserve the best. They clinked their glasses, toasting to a life that didn't exist. They were drinking my champagne, sleeping in my room, and flying on my miles. They were celebrating their deception, broadcasting their fraud to the world. Chelsea looked into the camera lens, her eyes gleaming with triumph. To all the haters who said we were moving too fast, or that we couldn't afford this eat your heart out, we're living the dream. I tapped the screen of my phone, pausing the video on their smiling faces. They looked so happy, so secure. They really thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought the plane ride over was the beginning of their new life. They didn't realize it was actually a deportation flight to a reality they weren't equipped to handle. Enjoy the champagne, Marcus. I whispered to the empty office. Because checkout time is going to be a lot earlier than you think. The sun hadn't yet risen over the East River when I walked onto the trading floor. The air here was different, charged with electricity and the smell of ambition. While my brother was sleeping off a champagne hangover in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, I was already awake and steering the course of the global economy. I swiped my badge at the security turnstile. The guard nodded at me. "Good morning, Miss Washington." He knew who I was. Everyone in this building knew who I was. To them, I wasn't a secretary. I was a predator. I took the private elevator to the 45th floor. My office was a corner suite with glass walls that offered no privacy because I didn't need it. I wanted everyone to see me working. I wanted them to see the black woman who'd climbed over every obstacle to sit in the big chair. My assistant, James, was already there, waiting with a double espresso and a tablet loaded with the overnight market reports from Asia. "The Nikkei is down 2%, he said, following me into the office. "And the tech sector in Shenzhen is rallying. Do we hold or sell?" I sat down at my desk, a massive slab of polished obsidian. Behind me, 6 screens flickered with real-time data from every major exchange in the world. I scanned the numbers. My brain processed the patterns faster than any algorithm. I saw the weakness in the tech rally. I saw the opportunity in the currency fluctuation. "Sell the tech position," I commanded, my voice cutting through the quiet hum of the office. "Short the yen and move 50 million into the renewable energy ETF before the opening bell." "Do it now." James nodded and tapped furiously on his tablet. Done. Just like that, I'd moved more money in 30 seconds than my entire family would earn in 10 lifetimes. $50 million. It was a number that would make my mother faint. She still thought I spent my days filing invoices and making coffee for white men in suits. She thought my bonuses were a few hundred at Christmas. She had no idea that my last quarterly bonus could have bought her house 3 times over in cash. I watched the numbers on the screen shift. Green, red, green again. Every tick was a fortune, won or lost. I thrived in this chaos. This was where I belonged. Not at a card table by the kitchen door. Not being told to stand out of the frame. Here, I was the frame. I was the architect of my own destiny and the silent financier of theirs. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from the credit card company. Failed attempt to charge $15,000 at a resort in Bora Bora. Attempted by Marcus Washington. Reason: card reported stolen. I picked up the phone and stared at it. I could picture him right now standing at the front desk of that overwater bungalow, arguing with a manager who was rapidly losing patience. He was probably wearing those ridiculous white linen pants, thinking he could charm his way out of a declined transaction. He didn't know that I was the one who'd declined him. He didn't know that the hand that fed him was the same hand that was currently crushing the Japanese yen. I smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. "James," I said, not looking up from the screens, "get the legal department on the line. I have some personal assets I need to restructure, specifically a residential lease in Tribeca. I want to make sure the eviction notice is watertight." James paused at the door. "Is everything okay, Miss Washington?" "Everything is perfect," I said. "I'm just cleaning up my portfolio, removing the underperforming assets." I turned back to the screens. The market was opening. The bell rang. And while Wall Street began its chaotic dance of greed and fear, I sat in the eye of the storm, perfectly calm, knowing that thousands of miles away, my brother was about to learn a very expensive lesson in economics. The free ride was over, and the market correction was going to be brutal. The phone on the bedside table rang, cutting through the sound of the ocean lapping against the stilts of the bungalow. Marcus reached for it lazily, one hand still holding a flute of my vintage champagne. He probably thought it was the concierge calling to ask if they wanted a private sunset cruise, or perhaps a complimentary couples massage. He answered with the bored affectation of a man who was used to being catered to. "Hello, this is Mr. Washington." "Mr. Washington, this is Henry from the front desk." The voice on the other end wasn't warm. It was crisp, professional, and icy. "I'm afraid we have a situation with the credit card on file. The authorization for your stay has been declined." Marcus sat up straighter, water splashing out of his glass onto the expensive teak floor. He laughed, that same nervous laugh from the wedding reception. "That's ridiculous. There must be a mistake. That's a Centurion card. It has no limit. Just run it again." "We've attempted to run it 3 times, sir," Henry replied. "The issuer has flagged the card as reported lost or stolen. All charges have been blocked. We can't proceed with your reservation without a valid form of payment." Chelsea looked up from her phone, where she was busy filtering a photo of her toes against the turquoise water. "What is it, babe? Is that room service?" "I want the lobster." Marcus waved her off, his face draining of color. "Listen, Henry, my sister handles my accounts. She probably just froze it by accident because of the international travel. I'll call her and get it sorted. Give me an hour. I'm afraid that's not possible, Mr. Washington. Our policy for the overwater suite is strict. We require a valid pre-authorization of $15,000 immediately to cover the room and incidentals. If you can't provide a new card right now, we'll have to ask you to vacate the suite. $15,000. The number hung in the humid air like a guillotine blade. Marcus looked at his wallet sitting on the nightstand. It contained a debit card with maybe $400 on it and 3 maxed out credit cards that were currently accruing interest at 24%. He didn't have $15,000. He didn't even have $1,500. Wait, you can't kick us out. We just got here. We're on our honeymoon. I understand that, sir. However, we're a business. We need a valid card now. Marcus looked at Chelsea. She was pouting now, annoyed that he wasn't paying attention to her. Babe, who's on the phone? You're ruining my vibe. Marcus felt the room tilt. The paradise I'd built for him was dissolving into pixels. The luxury he felt entitled to was being stripped away layer by layer. He realized with a jolt of pure terror that the bank maintenance lie he'd told at the wedding wouldn't work here. This wasn't a catering manager he could charm. This was a multinational resort corporation. He clutched the receiver so hard his knuckles turned white. Can you take a check? There was a pause on the line, a pause filled with judgment. No, sir. We don't accept checks. You have 30 minutes to come to the front desk with a valid payment method, or security will be sent to escort you and your luggage to the mainland ferry terminal. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like an angry insect. He looked at the champagne. He looked at the view, and he realized he was about to be the first man in history to be evicted from paradise before he even unpacked his bags. The golf cart ride away from the overwater bungalow felt like a funeral procession. Marcus sat facing backward, watching the turquoise paradise recede into the distance. Beside him, Chelsea sat with her arms crossed so tightly across her chest that her knuckles were white. She wasn't speaking, but the air around her vibrated with a rage so intense it almost drowned out the sound of the ocean. We're moving you to our available garden accommodation, the manager, Henry, had said, his voice devoid of any apology. It's the only room tier that matches the cash deposit you were able to scrape together from your wallet. The garden room was a generous title. It was a small concrete block located at the far edge of the resort property, directly behind the industrial laundry facility. The air conditioning unit rattled and coughed, blowing out air that was somehow hotter and wetter than the tropical heat outside. There was no view of the mountain. There was no view of the lagoon. The only view from the single narrow window was a corrugated metal fence and a row of staff bicycles. The bellhop dropped their Louis Vuitton luggage onto the linoleum floor with a heavy thud. He didn't wait for a tip. He knew better. Chelsea stood in the center of the room, staring at the single queen bed with its thin polyester spread. The humidity was already frizzing her hair. She turned to Marcus slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. You have to be kidding me, she whispered. This is a joke, right? This is some kind of prank for a reality show. Babe, listen, Marcus started, reaching
Subscribe.
for her. Don't you dare touch me, she screamed. She picked up a decorative cushion and threw it at his head. You lied to me, Marcus. You said you were rich. You said your family was loaded. You said Maya was just the help. Look at this place. It smells like bleach and poverty. How am I supposed to post this? How am I supposed to influence anyone from a shed behind a laundromat? It's just a mix-up, Marcus pleaded, dodging another pillow. Maya's just playing games. She's jealous of us. She's trying to ruin our moment. Jealous? She laughed, a cruel, hysterical sound that echoed off the concrete walls. Jealous of what, Marcus? Of this? She cut off your credit card from the other side of the world. Secretaries don't have that kind of power. You lied about who she is, just like you lied about who you are. You're nothing without her money. She sat down on the edge of the sagging bed and put her face in her hands, sobbing with pure, selfish fury. Fix this. Fix this right now, or I'm leaving. I'll swim back to New York if I have to. Marcus fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He scrolled to Maya's contact. He pressed call. It rang and rang and rang. Every ring was a hammer blow to his chest. He closed his eyes, picturing her picking up. He pictured her sighing and saying, "Okay, Marcus, I made my point. Here's the money." He needed her to be the sister she'd always been, the safety net, the fixer. Pick up, he whispered, sweat dripping down his temple. Please, Maya, pick up. The call clicked. His heart leaped. You've reached the voicemail of Maya Washington. I'm currently unavailable. If this is a business matter, please contact my assistant. If this is a personal matter, please reconsider the value of my time. Beep. He dialed again instantly. This time it didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail. She blocked you, Chelsea said, her voice dead. She blocked you and she left us here to rot. Marcus stared at the phone screen. For the first time in his 30 years, he realized that no one was coming to save him. The silence on the other end of the line was louder than Chelsea's screaming. It was the sound of his own irrelevance. The phone on my desk in Manhattan hadn't stopped ringing for 3 hours. It wasn't my business line, it was an old prepaid burner phone I kept in a drawer specifically for family emergencies. They didn't have my real number. They had the number I gave them 5 years ago when I told them I could only afford a pay-as-you-go plan. I watched it vibrate across the polished obsidian surface. It danced with a manic energy, fueled by the rage of two people who were realizing their golden goose had flown the coop. I picked it up not to answer, but to listen. I put it on speaker and let the voicemails play out into the quiet luxury of my office. First came Teresa. Her voice was shrill, tight with panic that was quickly curdling into fury. Maya, answer the phone. Where are you? Marcus just called me from Bora Bora. He says they're in some shed. He says the card didn't work. Fix this, Maya. Fix this right now. Do you hear me? He's on his honeymoon. You can't do this to him. You're ruining everything. Next was Robert. His voice boomed through the speaker, the sound of a man who was used to being obeyed even when he had no authority. Girl, you better pick up this phone. I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. You think because you have a little bit of money saved up, you can disrespect your brother? You're jealous. That's what this is. You're a bitter, jealous little girl who can't stand to see Marcus happy. You fix that card, or so help me God, I'll come down there and drag you to the bank myself. The messages continued a relentless stream of abuse and entitlement. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask why I left the wedding. They only demanded. They demanded money. They demanded obedience. They demanded that I return to my designated role as the silent financier of their delusions. The 15th message was from Teresa again. She was crying now, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of frustration. How could you be so selfish? He's your brother. He needs you. Chelsea's crying her eyes out. This was supposed to be perfect, and you ruined it. You always ruin everything. You're hateful, Maya. Just hateful. If you don't transfer $10,000 to Marcus's account in the next hour, don't bother coming home for Thanksgiving. Don't bother coming home ever. I let the silence hang in the air after the last message ended. Thanksgiving. As if eating dry turkey and listening to them brag about Marcus's imaginary successes was a reward I should strive for. As if their presence was a gift and my money was the admission fee. I looked around my office, the view of the East River, the awards on the shelf, the life I'd built with my own hands. While they called me selfish, they thought they were threatening me. They thought the withdrawal of their affection was a punishment. They didn't realize they were handing me the keys to my freedom. I picked up the burner phone. I didn't call them back. I didn't text. I walked over to the shredder in the corner of the room. The machine hummed to life as I fed the SIM card into its teeth. The plastic crunched and snapped, a satisfying sound of finality. I dropped the phone into the trash can. Goodbye, Teresa, I whispered. And happy Thanksgiving. I sat in the boardroom, the ink still wet on the acquisition papers for a mid-sized tech firm. My signature was worth $40 million in that moment. I looked at my phone. It was silent now, the burner phone destroyed, but I knew they were still out there, screaming into the void. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to scream back. They wanted the angry, ungrateful daughter trope so they could justify their mistreatment. They wanted to drag me down into the mud with them, where they were comfortable. I refused to give it to them. Silence was a weapon, but success was a nuclear bomb. I opened Instagram. I'd kept my profile private for years, a small curated garden of landscapes and book quotes. My family followed it, but they never engaged. To them, my life was boring because it didn't revolve around them. Today, I flipped the switch. Public. I scrolled through my camera roll to a photo taken just minutes ago by my PR manager. It was candid but perfect, me at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by 3 white male CEOs who were looking at me with absolute deference. My posture was regal. My pen was poised over the contract. My Rolex, the one that cost more than Marcus's entire wedding, glinted in the harsh boardroom light. I looked powerful. I looked untouchable. I looked like the person they claimed I could never be. I uploaded it. The caption needed to be precise, a surgical strike that would bleed them dry without me ever lifting a knife. I typed slowly. While some people spend their energy creating drama, I spend mine creating generational wealth. When you're busy building an empire, you don't have time for parasites. Hashtag booked and busy, hashtag debt free. I hit share. The reaction was instantaneous. It started with a trickle, a like from a former colleague, a comment from a client congratulating me on the merger. And then the dam broke. The algorithm picked it up. But more importantly, the family grapevine picked it up. My cousin Keisha, who hadn't spoken to me since I refused to fund her pyramid scheme 2 years ago, was the first to comment. Wait, is that the CEO of Techstar in the background? Sis, are you okay? Is that your office? I didn't reply. Then came Andy May, the family broadcaster, the woman who could spread a rumor faster than a fiber optic cable. She shared it to her story within 2 minutes with a row of shock emojis. I watched the view count tick up. 1050, 500. The family group chat, which I'd muted but not left, lit up like a Christmas tree. I watched the notifications roll in from the safety of my lock screen. Did you see Maya's post? Is she rich? Why is she calling us parasites? Wait, look at that. Watch. That's a Daytona. That's 50 grand easy. Since when does Maya have 50 grand? I thought she was a secretary. Secretaries don't sit at the head of the table. The narrative was shifting in real time. 10 minutes ago, they were talking about the mean sister who ruined the honeymoon. Now they were talking about the rich sister they'd underestimated. The confusion was delicious. They couldn't reconcile the image of the servant they knew with the boss they were looking at. I watched the comments roll in, questions about my job, questions about my money, sudden declarations of family pride from relatives who wouldn't look me in the eye at the reunion. Cousins who'd blocked me were suddenly sending friend requests. I sipped my sparkling water and swiped the app closed. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to defend myself. I just needed to let them see what they'd lost, let them wonder, let them speculate, let them eat each other alive, trying to figure out how they missed the gold mine sitting right in front of their faces. I'd dropped the bait, and the sharks were already turning on each other. I sat in the glow of my monitor, the only light in the room. It was time to drop the hammer. I logged out of my personal email and logged into the administrator account for Phoenix Ventures LLC. The inbox was empty. The outbox was about to destroy my brother's life. I opened a new message window. The recipient field auto-filled with Marcus's email address, the one he'd used to send me links to furniture he wanted me to buy. The subject line needed to be clear. Urgent. Notice of lease termination, Unit 4 by. Began to type. Dear Mr. Washington, this email serves as formal notification that your lease agreement for the property located at Tribeca Lofts, Unit 4B, is hereby terminated effective immediately, per Clause 4B of the lease agreement. Possession of the property is contingent upon receipt of the security deposit and first month's rent, totaling $50,000. As of this morning, no such funds have been received. I paused. $50,000. The exact amount that was currently sitting in my safe. The exact amount he'd expected me to hand over like a good little servant. I continued typing. Consequently, the lease is void. All access codes have been deactivated. You have 48 hours to remove any personal belongings currently stored on the premises. Failure to vacate within this time frame will result in the disposal of said items at the owner's discretion. Please do not attempt to access the building without prior authorization, as security has been notified to treat unauthorized entry as trespassing. Regards. Management. Phoenix Ventures LLC. Read it over. It was cold. It was impersonal. It was perfect. To Marcus, this was just a faceless corporation crushing his dreams. He had no idea that the management he was begging for mercy was the sister he'd left by the kitchen door. He'd read this email in that sweaty laundry room in Bora Bora, and he'd know it was over. The apartment he'd bragged about to his friends. The nursery Chelsea had already planned. The address he'd put on his wedding invitations. Gone. Vaporized. Because he tried to spend money that wasn't his. I hovered the mouse over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I sent this, he was homeless. He'd come back to New York with a new wife, no money, and nowhere to live. He'd have to crawl back to our parents, who'd just lost their reputation. It was a complete dismantling of his life. I thought about the way he looked at me outside the hotel, the way he demanded the envelope, the way he felt entitled to my labor and my success. I clicked send. The email vanished from the screen. On its way to the other side of the world. I closed the laptop. It was done. The trap was sprung. Now all I had to do was wait for the scream. The fluorescent lights of the Poppet airport terminal buzzed with a headache-inducing hum that matched the ringing in Marcus's ears. He sat hunched forward on a hard plastic chair, his head in his hands. His phone screen was cracked from where he'd dropped it in his panic to book the last two seats on a red-eye flight back to New York. They were in row 42 right next to the toilets. It had cost every single dollar he had left in his savings account, plus the emergency cash he'd stolen from his mother's purse before the wedding. He was completely illiquid. He was broke. And the woman sitting next to him looked ready to kill him. Chelsea wasn't crying anymore. Her tears had dried up somewhere between the humiliating boat ride from the resort and the realization that she was flying economy. Now she was just cold. She scrolled through her phone, deleting the photos she'd posted just hours ago. The photos of the champagne. The photos of the view. She was erasing the evidence of her failure. You said it was handled, she said, her voice low and venomous. You said the apartment was secure. You said the lease was signed. It is signed, Marcus pleaded, keeping his voice down as travelers stared at them. It's just a misunderstanding with the management company. As soon as we get back, I'll go to the office and clear it up. I just need to talk to them. Talk to them with what money, Marcus? Chelsea snapped, turning to face him. Her eyes were hard like flint. You spend our last $3,000 on these tickets. We have nothing. We don't have a deposit. We don't have rent. We don't even have a place to sleep when we land because you got us evicted before we even moved in. It's Maya's fault, Marcus hissed. She set this up. She's doing this to punish us. Stop blaming your sister, Chelsea shouted, causing a woman to rose away to look up from her book. At least she has money. At least she's somebody. Who are you, Marcus? You're a fraud. I should have listened to my father. He told me this would happen. He told me that people from your background don't know how to handle money. He said you were all flash and no substance trying to climb a ladder you don't belong on. Marcus recoiled as if she'd slapped him. The mask had finally slipped. For months, Chelsea had played the part of the progressive, colorblind soulmate. But now, faced with a future without his sister's money, the truth came pouring out. She didn't love him. She loved the idea of him. She loved the proximity to wealth. She thought he provided. She viewed him as a project, a rescue mission, and now that the mission had failed, she was looking at him with pure disgust. I thought I was marrying up, she continued, her voice dripping with disdain. I thought I was marrying into a family that had made it. But you're just another statistic, aren't you? Another broke man, expecting a woman to carry him. I gave you credibility, Marcus. I gave you status. And you gave me a middle seat next to a bathroom. I'm going to fix it, Marcus said, but his voice was weak. I'll get the money from where? Chelsea laughed, a harsh, barking sound. From the sister you treated like a maid? From the parents who can't even pay for their own dinner? Face it, Marcus. The ride is over. And don't expect me to stick around for the crash. She turned away from him, putting in her noise-canceling headphones. It was a clear signal. She was done listening to his lies. Marcus looked out the window at the dark runway. He realized then that he wasn't just flying home to an eviction notice. He was flying home to a divorce, and the worst part was, he knew he deserved it. He'd bet everything on a lie. And the house had finally won. The Uber ride from JFK was silent and smelled of stale pine air freshener. It was a far cry from the black car service Marcus had grown accustomed to using on my account. He and Chelsea dragged their suitcases out of the trunk onto the wet pavement of Tribeca. It was raining, a cold, miserable New York drizzle that soaked through Marcus's thin linen shirt instantly. He shivered. He looked up at the building. It was a fortress of glass and steel. His fortress. Or so he thought. Just let me get inside, Chelsea snapped, her mascara running down her cheeks. I need a shower. I need to charge my phone. I need to forget this entire nightmare ever happened. They pushed through the heavy glass doors of the lobby. The doorman, a burly man named Ralph who usually greeted them with a smile, didn't move to help with the bags. He stayed behind his marble desk, his eyes fixed on a monitor. He didn't even look up as they struggled toward the elevators. Marcus felt a flicker of unease, but he pushed it down. He told himself Ralph was just busy. He told himself everything would be fine once he was upstairs in his 3,000 square foot sanctuary. The elevator ride to the fourth floor felt like it took hours. Marcus watched the numbers climb, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was rehearsing the speech he'd give the management company tomorrow. He'd charm them. He'd beg. He'd make it work. The doors slid open. They stepped into the private hallway that led to Unit 4B, and then they stopped. The hallway wasn't empty. It was filled with black plastic mountains. There were dozens of them, heavy-duty contractor bags piled haphazardly against the walls. They looked like garbage waiting for pickup. Marcus stared at them confused. Why would the neighbors leave their trash out like this? It was a violation of building code. Chelsea walked forward slowly. She reached out and touched one of the bags. The plastic crinkled loudly in the silence. There was a tear in the side of one bag, and a piece of white lace was poking out. She froze. She ripped the hole wider. It was her veil, the hand-embroidered cathedral-length veil that had cost $3,000. It was stuffed into a trash bag next to a dirty sneaker and a half-empty bottle of shampoo. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a frequency that shattered the air. "Why are my things in the hallway?" Marcus ran to the door of the apartment. He grabbed the handle. It was locked. He punched the code into the sleek black keypad. 1992. The keypad flashed red. A harsh electronic buzz signaled failure. He punched it again, harder this time. 1992. Red light. Denied. "Open the door, Marcus." Chelsea screamed behind him. She was tearing open another bag. Silverware clattered onto the floor. Their wedding gifts, the crystal vases, the espresso machine, all of it thrown together like refuse. "It's not working," Marcus shouted back, panic rising in his throat like bile. "The code's not working. It must be a glitch. The battery must be dead." He pulled out his phone to open the smart home app. He tapped the icon for the lock. Access revoked. User not authorized. Contact administrator. He stared at the screen. The administrator. The landlord. Phoenix Ventures LLC. And then he saw it. Taped to the door at eye level was a single sheet of paper. It was a printed copy of the email I'd sent him, the eviction notice. Clause 4B. Immediate termination. Chelsea was on her knees in the hallway, surrounded by the debris of her short-lived high life. She was holding a broken picture frame, a photo of them from the engagement party. The glass was shattered. "They changed the locks," she said, looking up at him. Her eyes were empty. There was no love left in them, only a cold, hard realization. "We don't live here, Marcus. We never lived here." Marcus pounded on the door with his fist. "Open up," he screamed, his voice cracking. "This is illegal. You can't do this. I live here." The door remained solid, unmoving. Inside, the apartment was dark and silent. It was empty, just like his promises, just like his bank account, just like his future. He slid down the door until he hit the floor. He sat there amidst the garbage bags, listening to the hum of the elevator and the sound of his wife weeping over a broken toaster. He realized then that the only thing separating him from the homeless people on the street below was a layer of glass and a security code he no longer possessed. He wasn't a tenant. He was just trash in the hallway, waiting to be taken out. Chelsea propped her phone against a black contractor bag containing her wedding dress. She ran her hands through her damp, frizzy hair, smearing her mascara further down her cheeks. She needed to look broken. She needed to look like the ultimate victim. She hit the live button. The counter ticked up immediately. 100 viewers. 1,000. 5,000. The internet loved a train wreck, and she was about to give them a collision. "Hey guys," she choked out, her voice trembling with a practiced vibrato. "I seriously don't even know where to start. I'm literally sitting in a hallway right now on the floor surrounded by garbage bags." She turned the camera to show the pile of refuse that used to be her carefully curated life. "This is our stuff. Our wedding gifts. My dress. Everything." She turned the camera back to her face, tears streaming freely now. "We just got back from our honeymoon. We were so happy, and we came home to this. Our landlord Phoenix Ventures LC locked us out. They changed the codes. They threw our stuff in the hall like we're criminals." She paused to read the comments. They were flying by too fast to read individual words, but she saw the emojis. Broken hearts. Angry faces. Fire. "We paid the deposit." She lied, looking straight into the lens without blinking. We signed the lease. We did everything right. And this faceless corporation just decided to steal our money and leave us homeless. It's illegal. It's inhumane. Who does this to people? Who does this to a couple who just got married? Marcus sat against the wall behind her, his head in his hands. He didn't stop her. He let her spin the narrative because it was the only currency they had left. If they couldn't pay with cash, they'd pay with pity. Please, guys, Chelsea pleaded, leaning into the camera, her eyes wide and desperate. Please share this. Tag Phoenix Ventures. Tag the news. We need help. We have nowhere to go. We're good people, and we're being destroyed by a scammer landlord. Don't let them get away with this. She ended the stream. The video processed and uploaded. Within minutes, it had 10,000 shares. The hashtag boycott Phoenix Ventures started trending in New York. People were calling for the head of the landlord. They were demanding justice for the poor young couple. Uptown, in the climate-controlled silence of my penthouse, I watched the video on my iPad. I watched Chelsea lie through her teeth. I watched her slander my company. I watched her claim she'd paid money that was currently sitting in my safe. I watched the internet sharpen its pitchforks, preparing to attack a monster that didn't exist. Most people would be panicked. Most people would be calling their PR team, begging for damage control. But I wasn't most people. I was a portfolio manager. I knew how to leverage volatility. I knew that when a stock was overhyped based on false data, the crash was inevitable and profitable. Chelsea had just made a fatal error. By taking this public, she'd waived her right to privacy. By accusing my company of a crime, she'd given me the legal standing to defend my reputation with receipts. She thought she was starting a revolution. She didn't realize she was handing me the ammunition to end her. I took a sip of my tea. The steam curled up in the quiet air. I looked at the frozen image of her tear-stained, lying face on my screen. You wanted attention, Chelsea, I whispered to the glass. You got it. I closed the app. They'd taken the bait. Now it was time to reel them in and gut them. The elevator door slid open with a cheerful ding that felt like an insult in the heavy silence of the hallway. Robert and Teresa stepped out, expecting to walk into a luxury apartment tour. Instead, they walked into a refugee camp made of designer luggage and garbage bags. My mother let out a scream that was part horror and part theatrical performance. She rushed forward, her heels clicking frantically on the floor tiles. Marcus. Chelsea. Oh my God. Look at you. Look at this mess. She dropped to her knees beside Marcus, ignoring the dirt on the floor. She grabbed his face in her hands, checking him for injuries as if he'd just returned from war instead of a failed vacation. My poor baby, she wailed. How could she do this to you? How could your own sister leave you on the street like a dog? Robert stood back, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He kicked a black trash bag. It made a hollow thud. He looked at the eviction notice still taped to the door. He ripped it down, crumpling the paper in his large fist. This is illegal, he bellowed, his voice echoing in the narrow corridor. You can't just lock people out. I know people. I know judges. I'll have this Phoenix Ventures shut down by the end of the week. Chelsea looked up, her eyes red and puffy. It's Maya, she sobbed. She stole the money, Robert. She took the envelope at the wedding, the $50,000 that was for the deposit. She took it and she ran. That's why we're here. That's why we're homeless. She stole our future. Robert stopped moving. The information hit him like a physical blow. He didn't know about the lease terms. He didn't know I owned the building. All he heard was that his daughter had walked away with $50,000 of family money. In his mind, that money belonged to Marcus by birthright. She stole it, he repeated, his voice dropping to a low growl. She stole from her brother on his wedding day. Teresa stood up, brushing the dust from her knees. Her eyes were cold, hard. She's jealous, Robert. I told you. She's always been jealous of Marcus. She wants to destroy him because she's miserable. She thinks because she has a little job in the city, she can look down on us. Well, she's about to learn a lesson about respect. Where is she? Robert demanded, looking at Marcus. Where does she think she can hide? Marcus wiped his nose on his sleeve, looking like a petulant child. She's at work, he sniffled. She's always at work. That office downtown, the one where she answers the phones? Robert adjusted his tie. He buttoned his jacket. He looked like a general preparing for battle. Get up,
Subscribe.
he ordered. Grab your things. We're putting them in the car, and then we're going to pay your sister a visit. Teresa nodded, her face set in a mask of righteous fury. We're going to her job. We're going to march right in there and demand that money back. We'll scream it in front of her boss. We'll scream it in front of every client in that lobby. Let's see how smug she is when she gets fired for theft. Chelsea stood up, a flicker of hope returning to her eyes. You're going to make her pay? We're going to break her, Robert promised. She wants to play games with money? I'll show her what happens when you steal from the head of this family. They gathered the bags. They marched to the elevator. They were united in their anger. They were fueled by their delusion. They were heading to the address of the internship I held 10 years ago, ready to destroy a receptionist who didn't exist. They had no idea they were marching straight into the lion's den. The glass doors of the Miller Group building swung open with force. Robert marched in first, leading the charge like a bull entering an arena. Teresa was right behind him, her face twisted into a mask of righteous indignation. Marcus and Chelsea trailed them, dragging their suitcases, which squeaked against the polished granite floor. They looked like a traveling circus of misery, dirty clothes, messy hair, expensive luggage. Robert walked straight up to the front desk. A young woman with bright pink nails was typing on a computer. She looked up, startled by the sudden invasion of angry people. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You certainly can," Robert boomed, slamming his hand onto the pristine white counter. "We're here to see Maya Washington, and we're not leaving until she comes out here and faces us." The receptionist blinked. She typed a few keys. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have a Maya Washington in the directory." "Is she a client?" "She's an employee," Teresa shouted, stepping around Robert. "She's a secretary. She's worked here for 10 years. Stop covering for her. We know she's here. Tell her that her parents are here, and we want our money back." The receptionist looked terrified. She looked around the lobby. People were staring. Clients in suits were pausing their conversations to watch the spectacle. "Ma'am, I assure you, we don't have anyone by that name working here. Maybe she works for a different company in the building?" "Don't you lie to me," Teresa screamed. "She sends us photos from this lobby. I recognize that fountain. She works right here. Maya, come out here, you thief." Security was already moving. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a uniform approached the desk. He had the tired look of someone who dealt with too many entitled outbursts in his career. "Is there a problem here, folks?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. "Yes, there's a problem," Robert spat. "Your receptionist is lying. We're looking for my daughter, Maya Washington. She's hiding in the back with $50,000 of my son's money." The guard stopped. His eyes narrowed. He looked at Robert. Then he looked at the hysterical mother and the disheveled couple behind them. "Did you say Maya Washington?" he asked. "Yes," Teresa cried. "Maya Washington. Do you know her?" The guard let out a short, low whistle. "Yeah, I know her. Everyone who's worked here longer than 5 years knows Maya Washington. But she doesn't answer phones. Not anymore." He reached for the phone on the desk. He didn't dial security. He dialed a number from memory, a number that definitely didn't ring at a desk in this building. "You folks wait right here," he said, holding up a hand. "Don't move." He waited for the call to connect. "Miss Washington, this is Frank from the lobby at the old Miller building." "Yeah, I'm good. Listen, I've got a situation down here. There's a group of people claiming to be your family. They're screaming about money and making a hell of a scene. They say you work here." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. A slow grin spread across his face. "Yes, ma'am. They look exactly like that. You want me to send them where?" He grabbed a pen and wrote down an address on a sticky note. He nodded. "Got it. 45th floor. I'll tell them. Good luck, Miss Washington." He hung up the phone and ripped the note off the pad. He handed it to Robert, who snatched it greedily. "She's not here," Frank said, his voice filled with a strange mixture of amusement and pity. "She hasn't worked here in a decade. But she said she's expecting you. She said, if you want your money, you need to go to this address." He tapped the paper. "And she said, don't be late." The view from the 45th floor was blinding. New York City lay spread out beneath me like a circuit board of gold and steel. From this height, the cars looked like toys, and the people were invisible. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, sipping a sparkling water and watching the security feed on my tablet. I had access to the cameras in the lobby of my old building, thanks to a favor from the head of security there. I watched the silent black and white footage of my father slamming his hand on the desk. I saw my mother pointing a finger in the guard's face. I saw Marcus and Chelsea huddled together, looking like wet rats in designer clothes. My private line buzzed. It was Frank, Miss Washington, he said, his voice crackling slightly over the line. They're threatening to call the police. They say you're hiding in the mailroom. Your father's shouting that he's going to have you arrested for grand larceny. I let out a low, dry laugh. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. Let them scream, Frank, I said, my voice calm and smooth. Let them exhaust themselves, and then give them this address. One World Trade Center, 45th floor. Tell them I have a slot open in my schedule for exactly 15 minutes. If they're late, the door stays locked. I hung up and watched the screen. I saw Frank write something on a yellow sticky note. He handed it to Robert. My father snatched it from his hand, his eyes scanning the address. I could read his lips even from miles away. One World Trade. Robert turned to Teresa and sneered. He waved the paper in the air. See, he seemed to say, I told you she bounced from one secretary job to another. She probably sits at the front desk of some insurance firm answering phones for minimum wage. She's making us chase her across town just to buy time. Teresa adjusted her grip on her handbag. Her face was twisted in a mask of pure venom. I could almost hear her voice echoing through the screen. She thinks she can hide behind a new security badge. She thinks a new lobby will protect her. I don't care where she works. I don't care if she's scrubbing toilets or filing taxes. I'm going to walk into that building and I'm going to drag her out by her ear if I have to. She has Marcus's money, and I'm going to get it back. They marched out of the building, their movements jerky with rage. They piled back into their rental car. They were coming. They were driving downtown, fueled by the toxic fumes of their own entitlement. Marcus was likely in the back seat, reassuring Chelsea that everything would be fine. Dad will fix it, he was probably whispering. Dad will make her pay. I turned away from the window and looked at my office. It was a Shark Tank disguised as a sanctuary. The obsidian desk. The leather chairs that cost more than a Honda. The abstract art on the walls that whispered wealth to anyone who knew how to listen. They were coming to yell at a receptionist. They were coming to bully a secretary. They had no idea they were walking into the belly of the beast. They thought they were the hunters. They didn't realize they were the prey. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Naomi, I said. They're on their way. Have security clear them for the express elevator, and tell the staff to clear the floor. I want the office empty. I want them to hear their own footsteps when they walk to their execution. Copy that, boss, Naomi replied. The tiger is ready. I sat down in my chair and swiveled it to face the door. I folded my hands on the cool, dark stone of my desk, and I waited. The lobby of the financial tower was a cathedral of glass and cold ambition. The ceilings soared 3 stories high, supported by pillars of white marble that cost more than the entire neighborhood my parents lived in. Robert stopped just inside the revolving doors. His head tilted back as he tried to take in the sheer scale of the place. For a moment, the bluster was knocked out of him. He looked small. He looked like a tourist who'd taken a wrong turn into a world he wasn't qualified to enter. Teresa gripped her handbag tighter, her eyes darting around the space. She saw men in $5,000 suits walking with purpose. She saw women with Birkin bags and shoes that clicked with the authority of ownership. She looked down at her own outfit rumpled from the car ride and the stress of the day, and she scowled. Don't be intimidated. Robert, she hissed, her voice echoing slightly in the vast quiet of the lobby. It's just a building. Big companies need lots of little people to run them. Maya's just a cog in the machine. She probably answers the phones for 20 different executives. Robert straightened his tie, trying to regain his composure. You're right, Teresa. It's all smoke and mirrors. She wants us to be impressed. She wants us to think she made it. But we know the truth. She's the help. She's lucky she even has a job in a place like this. They approached the security desk, not a simple counter, but a fortress manned by 3 guards who looked more like Secret Service agents than lobby attendants. Robert slammed his hand on the marble surface, trying to replicate the aggression he'd shown at the old building. We're here to see Maya Washington, he announced. And we don't have all day. The head guard didn't flinch. He didn't look intimidated. He looked bored. He typed a name into his console, his eyebrows raised slightly. Miss Washington is expecting you, he said, his voice smooth and devoid of emotion. Please step into the scanner. Marcus and Chelsea shuffled forward. They looked like ghosts. Chelsea was staring at a woman walking past them, a woman wearing a blazer that Chelsea knew cost 3 months of rent. She swallowed hard. Dad, Marcus whispered, leaning close to Robert. Are you sure about this? This doesn't feel like a secretary building. This feels like money, Robert scoffed, loud enough for the guards to hear. Don't be stupid, Marcus. It's just a facade. She probably sits in a cubicle the size of a closet. She's making us jump through hoops to humiliate us. But once we get upstairs, once we get past all this security theater, she's just going to be Maya. Our Maya, the one who pays the bills. They pass through the scanners. The guard handed them temporary passes. Floor 45, he said. Express elevator on the left. Don't get off on any other floor. They walked to the elevator bank. The doors slid open with a whisper. The interior was paneled in wood and mirrors. They stepped inside, and the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the lobby. The elevator began to rise. It moved so fast their ears popped. 10, 20, 30. Teresa checked her reflection in the mirror, smoothing her hair. She practiced her angry face. She was ready to scream. She was ready to demand. She was ready to put her daughter back in her place. 40, 41, 42. Marcus wiped his sweaty palms on his pants. He watched the numbers climb. He had a sinking feeling in his gut, a primitive instinct telling him he was walking into a trap. But it was too late to turn back. 45. The elevator slowed. The bell chimed a soft, pleasant sound. The sound of arrival. The doors slid open, revealing not a hallway of cubicles, not a busy reception area, but a single expanse of silence and light. They stepped out and stopped breathing. The 45th floor wasn't a collection of cubicles. It was a single vast open space of polished concrete and floor-to-ceiling glass. There were no phones ringing. There were no stacks of paper. There was only the hum of the city far below and the quiet power of a space designed to intimidate. Robert took a step forward, his shoes echoing loudly on the floor. He looked around confused. Where's the reception desk? He muttered. Where's the waiting room? There is no waiting room, Robert, a voice said from across the room. You're already inside. They turned toward the voice. At the far end of the room sat a massive conference table made of a single slab of black marble. And at the head of that table sat me. I wasn't wearing my usual family gathering clothes. I wasn't wearing the sensible sweater and slacks I put on to look poor. I was wearing a white silk suit that cost more than their car. My hair was slicked back, sharp and severe. Behind me, the Manhattan skyline stretched out like a personal mural. On the desk in front of me sat a crystal nameplate, Maya Washington, managing partner. Welcome to my kitchen, I said, my voice carrying perfectly in the acoustic silence. Teresa blinked. What? I stood up slowly. You said I belonged by the kitchen doors, remember? You said I'd ruin the aesthetic if I sat at the main table. Well, this is my table now. And this is my kitchen. It's where I cook up the deals that pay for your lifestyle. I gestured to the empty chairs on the other side of the long table. Please stand over there. Don't sit. I just had the leather cleaned, and you look a little dusty. Marcus stared at me, his mouth hanging open. Maya, he whispered. Is this real? Do you work here? I laughed. It was a cold sound. Work here, Marcus? I own here. This is my firm. This is my floor. This is my view. The only thing in this room that doesn't belong to me is the air you're currently wasting. Robert finally found his voice. His face was red, not with anger anymore, but with a dawning, horrifying realization. You lied to us, he sputtered. You told us you were a secretary. You told us you were struggling. I told you what you wanted to hear, I countered, walking around the desk, my heels clicking rhythmically. You needed me to be small so you could feel big. You needed me to be the help so you could be the masters. If I'd told you I was running a hedge fund, you would have bled me dry 10 years ago. You would have demanded mansions instead of mortgages. You would have wanted jets instead of sedans. I gave you enough to survive, but you wanted more. You always want more. I stopped right in front of them. They shrank back, huddled together like frightened children. And now you're here to demand $50,000, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You broke into my office. You screamed at my security. And you dragged your suitcases across my city to demand money that you think you're entitled to. I leaned in close to Chelsea. She smelled like airport sweat and desperation. You wanted a clean photo, I said, smiling. You wanted the perfect frame. Well, look around, Chelsea. Is this clean enough for you? Is this aesthetic enough? Or am I still too dark to be in your picture? Chelsea burst into tears. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Ignorance is expensive, I said, turning back to the table. And today, the bill is due. Naomi, show them the menu. Naomi stepped out from the shadows near the window, holding a sleek silver remote in her hand like a weapon. She didn't say a word. She simply pointed it at the far wall, where a massive screen descended from the ceiling with a soft mechanical hum. The room dimmed automatically, the blinds adjusting to block out the glare of the afternoon sun. Pay attention, Naomi said, her voice crisp. This is the part where you learn how the world actually works. She clicked the remote. The screen flared to life. A document appeared, magnified to 10 feet tall. It was a standard residential lease agreement. Marcus squinted at it, recognizing the font immediately. It was the lease for the Tribeca loft, the dream apartment he'd spent the last 3 months bragging about to anyone who would listen. Look closer, Marcus, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. Who's the landlord? He read the words out loud, his voice shaking. Phoenix Ventures LLC. And look at the signature block, Naomi added, zooming in on the bottom of the page. Right there, next to the corporate seal. Marcus's eyes went wide. He gasped a sound that was sucked out of the room by the air conditioning. The signature was elegant, sharp and unmistakable. Maya Washington, managing member. That's right, I said, leaning back against my desk, crossing my arms. I am Phoenix Ventures. I bought that apartment 6 months ago with cash I made before breakfast. You spent weeks bragging about how you tricked a stupid absentee landlord into giving you a deal. You called the owner clueless. You laughed about how you were going to exploit their ignorance. Chelsea covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes darting between me and the screen. You, she whispered. You own the building? I own the unit, I corrected. And I own the eviction notice. You were planning to live in my house. You were planning to sleep under my roof. And you thought you could treat me like garbage while I subsidized your lifestyle. Clause 4B wasn't a standard contract term, Chelsea. I wrote it myself, just for you. Naomi clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time it was an invoice, a very large, very red invoice from the Pierre Hotel. The header read, past due, immediate action required. The total was $24,450 plus interest, plus legal fees. This was sent to collections this morning, Naomi said, her tone conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. The catering manager wasn't lying, Marcus. He filed a theft of services report. Your credit score just dropped about 200 points. You're not just homeless. You're unrentable. No landlord in the city will touch you with a 10-foot pole. Robert stared at the screen, his face pale. But the $50,000, he stammered, looking at me with pleading eyes. The money in the envelope that was supposed to cover this. It was supposed to cover the deposit on my apartment, I said, cold and unyielding. And since you never paid it, the lease is void. But the wedding debt? That's all yours. You ate the steak. You drank the wine. You danced on the floor. Now you get to pay the tab. I walked over to Marcus. He was trembling. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the floor, unable to hold my gaze. You thought I was the safety net, I said softly. You thought no matter how bad it got, Maya would fix it. Maya would pay. Maya would clean up the mess. Well, look at the screen, Marcus. The safety net is gone. And you're falling. Naomi turned off the projector. The screen went black, leaving them in the dim light of their own failure. Any questions? Naomi asked, smiling like a shark. Or are you ready for the next slide? Because, trust me, it gets worse. Naomi clicked the remote one more time. The invoice vanished. In its place appeared a series of blown-up screenshots, text messages, group chat logs. The timestamps were from the morning of the wedding. The group name was Future Mrs. Washington, but the conversation was anything but loving. I watched my parents squint at the screen. I watched the blood drain from my mother's face as she read the words typed by the daughter-in-law she'd worshipped for 2 years. Read it, Teresa, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Read what your precious Chelsea thinks about the family she just married into. Teresa trembled. Her lips moved silently at first, and then she whispered the words on the screen. I can't believe I have to hug his sweaty mother today. She smells like cheap perfume and desperation. I hope she doesn't get makeup on my dress. I stepped closer to the table. Keep reading, I commanded. Read the next one. The one where she talks about the future. Teresa looked at Chelsea, who was now staring at her shoes, refusing to make eye contact. Teresa read the next message, her voice shaking with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. At least the kids will come out lighter. We need to bleach the jeans a little bit. Marcus is cute for a black guy, but I don't want the kids to look like his sister. Too dark. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Robert looked at Chelsea with a look of pure betrayal. He'd bragged about her pedigree to everyone at the country club. He'd treated her like a prize. He'd pushed me aside to make room for her light, and here she was, calling his bloodline dirt. And the last one, I said, pointing to the bottom of the screen. This one's my favorite. It's from right after the ceremony. Robert read it this time, his voice rough. Finally secured the bag. Once we get the apartment, I'm going to make sure we distance ourselves from his ghetto family. They're so embarrassing, trying to act bougie. I give it 6 months before I can cut them off completely. Marcus stared at the screen. He looked at the woman he'd just promised to love and cherish. He looked at the woman he defended when she sat me by the kitchen door. You said that? He whispered. You called my family ghetto? Chelsea looked up, her eyes flashing with defensive anger. It was just a joke, Marcus. It's just girl talk. My friends understand my humor. You're taking it out of context. Context? I laughed. The context is that you're a racist gold digger who thought she found an easy mark. You thought Marcus came from money because I made him look rich. You thought you were marrying into a dynasty, but you were just marrying my credit score. And you despise them. You hate the very people who emptied their savings accounts to pay for your flowers. I looked at my mother. She was crying silent tears. The illusion was shattered. The white savior she thought she'd brought into the family was actually a predator who mocked her behind her back. You sat me by the kitchen because I was too dark, I said to Chelsea. You wanted to scrub me out of the photos. Well, guess what? The photos are the only thing you have left, because you certainly don't have the money, and you don't have the family. I turned to my parents. You worshipped her. You treated me like I was invisible because I didn't fit your image of success. You thought she elevated you, but she was laughing at you the whole time. She played you, and you let her do it because you were too busy looking down on me to see the snake in your own house. Naomi turned off the projector. The screen went black. The truth hung in the dark room, heavy and suffocating. They knew. Finally, they knew exactly what they'd bought with their loyalty. And the price was higher than they could ever afford. Marcus looked at the black screen where the eviction notice had been projected, and then down at the polished concrete floor. The surface looked hard and unforgiving. He looked at his linen suit, the one he'd bought on credit to impress strangers. It was wrinkled and stained with sweat. He looked at Chelsea, who was sitting in a heap of silence, useless to him, now that the illusion of wealth had evaporated. And then he looked at me, the sister he'd mocked, the sister he'd hidden in the back, the sister who held the keys to the only door in New York City that would open for him. He did the only thing he knew how to do when the walls closed in. He dropped. He didn't just lower himself. He collapsed. He fell to his knees with a heavy thud that echoed in the silent conference room. He crawled forward on the expensive rug toward my chair, like a penitent pilgrim approaching a shrine. He reached out, grabbing the hem of my white silk trousers with his shaking hands. Maya, please, he begged, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know it was you. If I'd known, I never would have treated you like that. You're my big sister. You're my blood. You can't let this happen to me. You can't let me be homeless. I looked down at him. From this angle, he looked like a child again, the little boy who used to break my toys and cry until I was the one who got in trouble. But I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. I saw the calculation in his tear-filled eyes. He wasn't crying because he was sorry for the insults or the disrespect or the years of ungrateful taking. He was crying because he was terrified of the shelter system. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a reinstatement of his privileges. I'm begging you, Maya, Marcus sobbed, burying his face in the fabric of my suit. I'll do anything. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll work it off. Just give me the code. Just let me back in the apartment, please. I have nowhere else to go. The hotels won't take me. My cards are dead. You're all I have. Before I could answer, the cavalry arrived. My mother rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside him. She wrapped her arms around his heaving shoulders, looking up at me with wet eyes that demanded compliance. Look at him, Maya, Teresa cried, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. Look at your brother. He's on his knees. He's begging you. Have you no heart? He made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. But you're destroying his life over a misunderstood deposit. Robert stepped in, his voice booming with that familiar patriarchal authority that used to make me shrink. That's enough, Maya. You've made your point. You've humiliated him. You've shamed us all. Now be the bigger person. You're the oldest. It's your job to protect him, not persecute him. He's family, and you don't turn your back on family no matter what they do. I watched them, the tableau of dysfunction. The mother coddling the grown man. The father demanding respect he hadn't earned. The brother using his weakness as a weapon. They really thought this would work. They thought if they made a big enough scene, if they cried loud enough, I'd revert to my default setting. They thought I'd sigh and pull out my checkbook and fix it just to make the noise stop, but the noise didn't bother me anymore. I found it instructive. It confirmed everything I needed to know. Even now, after seeing his wife call them racial slurs, after seeing his debts, they were still protecting him. They were still asking me to sacrifice myself to keep him warm. Get up, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their wailing like a scalpel. Get off my floor, Marcus. You're wrinkling my suit, and you look pathetic. I took a step back, a deliberate, calculated step that put exactly 3 feet of distance between me and the people who shared my DNA. Marcus's hands fell away from my suit, grasping at empty air. He looked up at me, his face a map of confusion, as if he couldn't process a world where his tears didn't equal my money. Family protects family, Robert said, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and fear. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. That's a lovely sentiment, Dad. Really touching. But let's look at the ledger, shall we? Because for the last decade, protection has flowed in only one direction downstream. From me to you. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city I'd conquered while they were busy spending my earnings. Let's review the invoice, I said, turning back to face them. 2015 Marcus got a DUI. Who paid the lawyer? Who paid the fine so he wouldn't have a criminal record and could finish college? Me. $7,000. Teresa opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off with a sharp wave of my hand. I'm not finished. 2017 you needed hip surgery, Dad. Your insurance wouldn't cover the specialist you wanted. You called me crying in the middle of a board meeting. Who wrote the check? Me. $12,000. I walked closer, ticking the items off on my fingers. 2020 the pandemic hit. You both lost your part-time jobs. You were 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank was sending foreclosure notices. Who caught you up? Who paid the property taxes for the next 2 years so you wouldn't lose the house? Me. $40,000. I looked at Marcus, who was still kneeling on the floor, and you. The car notes. The credit card bailouts. The seed money for that clothing line that never launched. The investment for the crypto scheme that went to zero. I've spent nearly $500,000 in 10 years buying your love. I bought your safety. I bought your dignity. And what did I get in return? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper that filled the room. I got mocked. I got told I was bossy. I got told I was acting like I was better than you. I got seated by the kitchen door at a wedding I paid for so your racist wife wouldn't have to look at my dark skin in her photos. I looked at Chelsea. She flinched. I have carried this family on my back for a decade. My spine is breaking, and I'm done carrying the weight. I walked back to my desk and pressed a button on the intercom. Naomi, escort them out. Marcus scrambled to his feet, panic seizing him again. Maya, wait. You can't do this. We have no money. We have nowhere to go. Just give me a loan. Just $5,000. I'll pay you back. I looked at him with eyes that felt like ice. You'll never pay me back, Marcus, because you have nothing of value to offer. The Bank of Maya is closed. Permanently. Don't call me. Don't come to this building. Don't send Mom to cry in my lobby. If you show up here again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. But we're family, Teresa wailed. No, I said, picking up my tablet and turning away from them. We're relatives. Family is people who respect you. And by that definition, I've been an orphan for a very long time. Naomi opened the door. 2 security guards stepped in. Get out, I said, without looking up. I heard them shuffling toward the door. I heard Chelsea sobbing. I heard Robert muttering curses. I heard the heavy door click shut, and then, finally, for the first time in 10 years, I heard silence, and it sounded like freedom. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of a private yacht, holding a flute of vintage Ross champagne. The warm breeze off the Hudson River played with the hem of my emerald green gown. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the New York City skyline in breathtaking shades of violet and gold. It was my birthday. My 33rd birthday. And for the first time in my life, it was actually about me. I looked around the deck. There were 50 people on board. Naomi, laughing with her husband near the bar. Marcus's former boss, now my business partner, telling stories to my head of marketing. Artists, investors, mentors. What I saw was a sea of excellence, successful, brilliant people who'd built their empires with their own hands. But more importantly, what I didn't see was expectation. There was no one here asking me for a loan. There was no one here asking me to fix a flat tire or bail them out of jail. There was no one here criticizing my hair or telling me I was too intimidating. There was no Robert sitting at the head of the table taking credit for my achievements. There was no Teresa crying about appearances. There was no Marcus looking at me like I was a walking ATM. For the first time in 33 years, my birthday was actually about me. Naomi walked over, clinking her glass against mine. She looked radiant in silver. "Happy birthday, boss lady," she said, her smile genuine and warm. "You know, I was thinking about your party last year. Do you remember it?" I took a sip of champagne. "I remember," I said. "I spent the night doing taxes for my father because he said it was the only gift he wanted. And then he complained that I didn't get him a bigger refund." Naomi laughed, shaking her head. "God, they were heavy. I don't think I realized how heavy they were until I saw you without them. You look different, Maya. You look light." I turned to look at the Statue of Liberty glowing in the twilight. She was right. For a decade, I'd walked through life wearing a vest made of lead, convinced that it was my duty to carry it. I thought that family meant suffering. I thought that love was measured by how much abuse you could endure. I was wrong. Family isn't whose blood runs in your veins. It's who would bleed for you. It's who stands by you when the checks stop clearing. It's who claps the loudest when you win. I looked back at the crowd. These people didn't need my money. They had their own. They didn't need my status. They had their own. They were here simply because they liked me. They respected me. The DJ transitioned into a soulful, upbeat track. A cheer went up from the group. Someone waved at me from the dance floor. "Come on, birthday girl," they shouted. "Stop working and start dancing. This is your night." I set my glass down on the railing. I took one last look at the shore. Somewhere in that vast city, my parents were probably sitting in their cramped apartment, complaining about how ungrateful I was. Somewhere, Marcus was probably waiting for a court date, blaming the world for his downfall, but their voices couldn't reach me here. The water was too wide, the music was too loud, and my life was too full. I turned my back on the city. I turned my back on the past. I walked onto the dance floor, surrounded by the family I'd chosen, and I let the rhythm take over. I was finally free. The photographer approached me near the railing. "One more," he said, lifting the camera. "Just one more, Miss Washington. A solo shot. The lighting right now is perfect." I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Old habits die hard. For 30 years, I'd been trained to step out of the frame. I'd been conditioned to hold the reflector so the light could shine on someone else. But this wasn't a wedding. And I wasn't a prop. I stepped to the center of the deck where the moonlight hit the white teak floor. I didn't suck in my stomach. I didn't shrink my posture to make myself look smaller. I stood tall, taking up exactly as much space as I deserved. I smoothed the silk of my green dress and looked directly into the lens. I smiled, not the polite, tight-lipped smile I used in boardrooms. A real smile. A smile that started in my chest and radiated outward. It was the smile of a woman who owed nothing to anyone. The shutter clicked, a soft mechanical sound that felt like a period at the end of a long, difficult sentence. The photographer walked over and turned the camera screen toward me. "Look at that," he said quietly. "That's the money shot." I looked at the image. The woman on the screen was glowing. She looked powerful. She looked peaceful. But mostly she looked complete. There were no empty spaces beside her where people should have been standing. There were no shadows of parents demanding more. There was no blur of a brother reaching for her wallet. The frame was full simply because I was in it. I touched the cold glass of the screen, tracing the outline of my own face. For so long, I thought being alone meant being lonely. I thought cutting them off would leave a hole in my life, but looking at this photo, I realized that cutting them off didn't create a void. It created space. Space for peace. Space for joy. Space for me. I looked out at the dark water one last time, breathing in the salt air. The city was sleeping, but I was wide awake. The nightmare was over. Family isn't the blood that runs in your veins. Family is the people who respect your position in the picture of their lives. Family is the people who don't ask you to shrink so they can feel big. And as I looked at that image of myself standing tall against the skyline, I knew the truth. The most beautiful picture of my life is the one without the shadow of exploitation. This story illustrates that blood relation doesn't grant a license for exploitation. Maya's liberation proves that setting firm boundaries with toxic family members is an act of self-preservation, not selfishness. For years, she equated financial support with love, only to realize her value to them was solely tied to her checkbook. True family is built on mutual respect and genuine support, not manipulation or entitlement. Walking away from those who drain your energy and resources creates space for those who truly value you. The ultimate victory lies in reclaiming your peace, dignity, and owning your success unapologetically. Hit the like button and subscribe if you believe in prioritizing your self-worth over toxic obligations.